The Dean Obeidallah show. Right now, very happy to have on back our friend Angelo Carusone, the president of Media Matters, a great media watchdog organization. I always recommend the website and learn a lot from the reports. And we're going to talk about some new reports right now that came out today and in the last few days. So, Angelo, welcome back. Nice to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Sure, my friend. Let's talk overarching. It's a little over a month. It felt like about 10 years of my life. I'm pretty sure Trump has taken
Yeah.
years of my life. At the end, the doctor's going to be like, you would have lived to 89, but you had those Trump years. So your life ended a little earlier. So what do you think? When you look at corporate media overall, and I don't mean Fox News, I mean mainstream legitimate outlets, NBC, CBS, that kind of stuff, CNN, MSNBC, you could break it down if you want, but just overarching, are they, how do you view their coverage in terms of what's needed? The stakes are so high and just it's a fire hose of stuff. Like it's a tsunami of information.
I mean, look, it's a big question because I think that, are they treating him like a cartoon character and sort of the melodrama that they've done historically? On balance, no, there's obviously problems with the coverage, right? And that's always the case. But I mean, big picture, they're trying not to be simultaneously hysterical, but also like not enabling to the worst degree all of the harms. Uh, uh, You know, they've sort of got it. I think the biggest challenge I think they face with they just don't know they haven't got the answers to this is that they're afraid of two things. One, they are afraid of lawsuits. And that has become very clear. So why that matters is that it affects not just it affects a lot of the language that they use and the framing of stories and what they're willing to publish. And that and again, this is something we talked about a lot. It's like you need to have some of that high valence, sharp language, and you need to make those points. And that doesn't mean attack, but it's like if your reporting has in it a lot of qualifiers and potential watering down of a story, it's harder to get to the meat of it to say, oh, that is really bad. So that is one piece, and that especially applies in the relationship between what Musk is doing at Doge and what Trump is doing, right? So it really then starts to water down some of the reporting and relationships there, and they just haven't figured that out. That's a real fear, and I think that's so deeply internalized at this point that it is baked into the day-to-day coverage. Uh,
That is interesting because of the lawsuits by Donald Trump where against CBS, ABC, Disney infamously paid $15 million and others. And there's little things. I'm literally looking at reporting right now with Steve Bannon doing the Nazi salute at CPAC. And the headline
yeah,
is Steve Bannon accused of doing Nazi salute. The picture is him doing a Nazi salute. It's not
yeah,
accused. We are seeing him. And he did it. This one we know he did the troll, right? This was a troll. It's concerning because you're trying to normalize the Nazi salute. And at some point,
that's right.
the crowd's going to give the Nazi salute back. And it's wink, wink, but it's also not wink, wink. Like
Yeah, that's it.
it's
Yeah.
both of that. I think we've talked about this where some things are wink wink and they go, oh, we're just trolling. But in reality, there's a reality to it that they want. They want this to become normalized where the crowd, and oh, isn't this funny? He does a Nazi salute and the whole crowd does Z Kyle back to him. That's funny,
That's right.
huh? We own the
Yeah.
libs. I'm like, you know, you're a Nazi.
Yeah. No, I mean, that is what you're watching this get born right now. I mean, this
Right.
is what they're literally birthing their ability to do a gesture that is either exactly like the Nazi suit or like a facsimile of it so that they can get it, they can have it both ways, right? They can say we're doing it to own the libs and troll them, and we're also secretly doing the Nazi salute because we like what it stands for. And this is not new, by the way. Like Rush Limbaugh used to call these things media tweaks. And he used to do this all the time in his show where he would say something that was like pretty bad that he knew would not like bad because it was like just objectionable, but like very specifically designed to like get the media to lose their minds about. And he would call it media tweaks. But even Limbaugh was never like, I'm going to do a media tweak by doing a full-on Nazi salute. It was always sort of vaguely sexual or hinting at some sort of contradiction that somebody could zap him for, but actually it was more of a tell on them. And like he under that, and again, I'm not trying to lionize them, but that's part of their DNA, and we should never
Mhm.
lose sight of that. That a lot of times when people are paying attention to what's happening in the right wing landscape, the right wing fever swamps now, increasingly more so, what has to be understood is that there are decades, 30 plus years of muscle memory built into this ecosystem. And so this idea that, oh, you can do something that you really don't mean, but you actually mean it, as a media tweak is not new. They're hardwired at this point to understand that and allow them to get away with it. So that's why somebody who may be 60 years old as a Republican thinking it's a media tweak. I'm
Right.
not a Nazi, and that 6-year-old, by the way, is not going to go out and do the Nazi salute because he's not an edgelord online. But in his brain, he can rationalize it by saying it's a media tweak. So, and I think this ties into something I was going to say about where the broad media coverage is. Where I think they're really failing is like when I think about Trump, I think about Trump the person, right? And then I think about Trump the hiring. So all of the extensions of Trump, because if they want to have a unitary executive, right? If they want to put all the power into Trump, then his
Yep.
avatars, his viceroys that he is sending out there to be extensions of the government, are increasingly important for understanding the news reporting. I think they're doing a terrible job reporting on all of these figures. They really are. The big names they report on, right? Like the people that got appointed to the cabinet posts and maybe a few others. But after that, no. And that's the challenge. They did a little bit of it with the Doge employees, but that's because they were novel and interesting and had like fun nicknames. And I also think they made maybe a little bit of a mistake by repeating big balls like hundreds of time on TV. Like they just looked silly. I'm not sure I would, if, I wouldn't have done that if sometimes you shouldn't, because it's like you're just helping them. You're sort of why are you putting pie in your own face repeatedly? I don't understand. But they haven't really done an exceptional job reporting on like that middle layer of staff that are rolling in. And that is important because those people, they don't get the same benefit of the doubt that Trump does. And they represent the very worst of what this administration is doing. And that is, I think, a really important missing ingredient. And this is where it ties in. I think in the past, that stuff, it's not that it's always been off limits, because of course a
Right.
public figure is not, but they never really oriented themselves toward intense coverage and reporting on those figures because that just was never the way the industry worked, right? You focus on the principles. But the intention here, and this is all part of their planning process, is that they're going into these very specific roles to do very specific things. I'll give one example. So when Sean Duffy took over the transportation department, one of the original things that he did right away was say that transportation funds were no longer going to be allocated across the traditional mechanisms based off of usage and need and other things, that the priority was going to go toward communities that had the highest birth rates, which doesn't have anything to correspond with transportation. Okay, they reported on the policy. There was some drippets of it because it was public. But that's a natalist policy. That's a Christian natalist policy. It's people who really are just focused on birth. It's a segment of the evangelicals, and they typically haven't had a seat at the table. Somebody in that office pushed that policy, right? Some critical person who was hired as a part of this, and we know who all the hires were because they were very
Right.
open about it. That is reporting that I'm talking about. Let's get to that person's natalist background and their tie-in and their broader connections to Christian nationalism and like the other things they plan on doing. And I think that's where they're not doing a good enough job, because and this is sort of the wrap up, that is that it's not just that we want to wag our finger at it. One of the ways, because it's a challenging environment, it feeds into powerlessness. But one of the ways that you can confront that powerlessness is by actually having a sense of what's coming around the bend, because then you can gird yourself for it. It's one thing, if you don't know the hurricane's coming or the tornado's coming,
Right.
you're kind of screwed when it happens. But if you
Yeah.
do, you can shutter your windows, you can go to a shelter, you can prepare. And that's kind of the thing where that matters. The so what matters not because it helps paint the picture of the moment, which is critical, and who's helping make these decisions, but it also says, oh, and by the way, this is what's next, right? So one of the things I would say is, we've only gotten through a little bit of Project 2025. Wait until a couple of months from now when they start going on mass killing of all the wild horses in the country, which is literally one of the policy proposals, which sounds bonkers, right? Now, I tell that to people not because I want them to suddenly think this is the most important thing in the world, but because it's like, that's where they're going. They're going to do that in the summertime or the fall. Whenever they get to that page, they're going to cull the wild horses herds that exist in the country. The rationale for it is absurd, and it doesn't even matter to get into. But that's the stuff that I think is important. It's to say we know their playbook, we know what they're doing. Let's decode it, and I think the media is doing not a great job at that.
And when you mention Project 2025, like today we heard reporting, and I'm not sure if it's confirmed or not, but it seems likely Trump wants to roll the post office in under his powers and moving to the Commerce Department and another department there. And when you look at Chapter 2 of Article 2025, written by Russ Vought, who was the OMB director, executive officer of the president, and it says the president should have enormous powers and it should not be vested in the department. It should be under his control. The president must set and enforce a plan for the executive branch. Sadly, however, President today assumes office to find a sprawling federal bureaucracy that is his own plans. They're laying out literally what their plan was. It was to bring everything under him. So, and they're like, well, it's probably illegal because the post office is, I don't think semi-autonomous is the right word, but on some level, that's the way you can think of it logically. And I'm like, it doesn't matter if it's illegal. Donald Trump's a convicted felon. I mean, the guy attempted a coup. I mean, what is this? What does this matter? I mean, literally, no one in the media talks about it. And no one goes like, that's a breaking the law. Oh, you mean the guy who's a convicted felon for cheating the 2016 election, who attempted a coup, was charged with felonies, who was charged with violating the Espionage Act, is now? He might be breaking the law again. Of course he's breaking the law, but it's not even his idea. This is Russ Vought and the other guys there reading. He cites Federalist 47. The accumulation of power should be the president and all this stuff. I'm like, these guys just fought a revolution to get away from a king. You can't cite the guys in the Federalist or like Hamilton and John Jay and James Madison. They wanted freedom from a king. And now they rewrite it to be like, they really wanted a king. You see, they know they fought a revolution, but they wanted a king. And that's why I'm going to, out of context, cite parts of the Federalist Papers, which, by the way, folks, in case you don't know, the Federalist Papers were literally like long letters to the editor written by Hamilton, Madison, and John Jay. And Hamilton wrote a big chunk of them. But they became
it was like a Twitter fight
in a way. Like these guys, right? They did so, and the whole argument was why we should pass the Constitution and enact the Constitution over the Articles of Confederation, which were failing us. So, but not to get into anything. There, to your very point, we should be reading more about Project 2025 because it's all in there. The guys around Trump, he's never read this. The guys around him, this is their. I said it on MSNBC during the campaign. This is their Mein Kampf. And people were like, what? That was my media tweak. I said that knowing it was going to get pressed, and of course it did.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Media tweak. That's it.
That was my media tweak. I knew by calling March 2025. I said, it is their Mein Kampf. He said Mein Kampf was only 700 pages. Project 2025, 900 pages. I remember saying on Joy Reid's show, and of course it got pressed. And you got to troll them a little bit. I mean, I'm not above that. Trying to make a point. So where are we going, Angelo? I mean, what's next? And my question for you is, what do I do in the independent media, even though oddly enough, we are corporate media, but we are like an independent media outlet. We get to do almost anything we want here. It's kind of remarkable until we get fired. But I can't cover, I have a 3-hour show. I could be on live 24 hours and can't cover everything. What do you recommend that myself and the others in independent media, we focus on? Is it policy? Is advocation a policy? Is it some of the stuff he posts online to give people a color of where this might be going? Like the King post is trolling, but it's also telling us where this is going in Trump's mind.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, part of it is that is what they want. I mean, there is whatever they want to describe it as, a CEO, a dictator, a monarchical like figure. The idea is that, and this is where Project 2025 and all these individual actions tie in. When we say it's about consolidating power, yes, but there's the key to that is it's not just about consolidating power. Baked into the Constitution, our system of government, the success of our society so far is that there's this notion that like the branches of government would fight for themselves too, that they would not like roll over to the others. So therefore you would actually have some type of a balance, right? Congress's power really isn't the power of the purse. And so a lot of these actions are designed specifically out of the gate to, one of them is to consolidate power via the power of the purse, right? So is empowerment. That's big. That's Russell Vought's big thing, is that you do all the things where you can not spend money that's allocated, move more money into your direct line of control. And then, it's like anything. If you have the checkbook, you're the person largely with the power at the end of the day. And that is the variable here. And then you could, of course, distribute that back out. That's how you then get people back in your corner. So you get all these exemptions. I'm a Republican senator. What about my 50 people in my state that are, right? Like, then, I'll give that back to you if you get back in line. And if you stay in line. So part of it is that is the mechanism for it. And it gets into your point about how do you cover it all. There's a few approaches, right? You could try to, I was a debater growing up, and even though I'm 20 years out, I still consider myself a debater. And when you're debating, one of the tactics is, right, you what's called spreading the flow. You throw as many different arguments out there as possible. Even if they're different, and your opponent can't respond to all of them. And typically some debates are math. So if you throw 10 arguments out and they only have a chance to respond to 3, you win by default because you got 7 through.
Genius.
And
Genius.
and
I
like
like this.
so one is you could try to cover the flow, right? You can try to go back and respond and cover all the things. I don't think that's the right idea for 2 reasons. It scares the crap out of people. It makes it too overwhelming. It's like trying to do a show about the universe, a million billion solar systems. It's like, oh my God, I can't get my head
Right.
around that, you know? So I think it's like any good piece of food. There's got a couple ingredients at least, right? So coverage, I think, is a combination of a few things. One, I think it should always start with this, especially when you're talking to people that are not already there, who maybe even voted for Trump the last time, whatever. But they're kind of the reality is most people don't want the policies, a lot of these policies, but there's something deeper. They kind of don't want this. It's unsettling. There's something unsettling about what's going on. There is for a
You're
lot of
speaking right
people.
now about where we are in this first month.
That's right. It's unsettling.
Which is backed up by the approval polls that have just slid right
Yeah,
off the cliff.
it's
They're dropping fast.
it is. It's unsettling. And
Right.
the people are a little like there's something, and that's partly why when Tim Walz said that weird thing, I think some Democrats thought, oh, we just have to use better insults. It's like, no, you don't get it. Reason it took off is because it tapped into everybody's gut. Because they're like, oh, they are kind of weird. So part of it is like we just have to say, look, at minimum, can we, before we agree on what we're doing, at least not this, right? And that's what I've been talking to people about who don't agree. It's like, not this, right? At least not this. This is not this. Not that. Not Stephen Miller. Not Musk and Trump sitting knee to knee, in these weird sort of like, not every day a new delegation of power. Like something is weird, right? Not this. Not Russia. Not getting into just not this. And people are pretty willing to say, yeah, not this. So one is, I would say, defined as coverage is just getting in the circle, right? And it's not the appeal stuff. This is not who we are. We're better than that. No, none of that. Just not this, right? One,
Mm-hmm.
not this. Get in the circle. The second is, and I think it's really important to reinforce that because a lot of people will get there eventually, if they're not already there. It's just not this. The second then is to try to focus on the direct harms, not all of them, but some that are personal and as personal as you can get. And I've been encouraging people to be selfish. And by that, I mean, I think Democrats and liberals sometimes have a hard time thinking selfishly. Say, well, I have to care about how that's going to affect workers in other states and poor people and sick people. And okay, yeah, we should care. It's nice. But how's it going to affect you?
Mm-hmm.
I know it's going to affect me. I know what my aha moment was. And there are lots of those little things. And you have to look for them. And that's important. People need to look for the things that are going to affect them. So one is like there are all these policy changes that are happening. You may never go to a public park, so you don't give a damn if they fire all the workers in Yosemite, But actually there are being able to connect them to things that are personal and how you got there encourages others to do that. And the direct harms is key. And I think that's missing. I think, and the same way that the right-wing media, what they do very well is not just they don't just broadcast to people, they actually teach them and train them to, in this case, usually search for indignities. You're right. I did see a happy holidays sign at my local pharmacy. I
Right.
am mad about that, Like they teach them to look for stuff. You should look. People should look for the
But they
things that
also
are going
don't
to
they
affect
give them,
them.
they teach them talking points, which they'll call my show and repeat. Like, for example, USAID, $50 million for condoms in Gaza, which was not
Yeah.
true
Yeah,
at
yeah,
all,
yeah.
right? It didn't matter.
Yeah,
They
right.
kept repeating it. Elon Musk finally goes, okay, I can't get everything right. And by the way, on Wednesday, Trump repeated
Yeah.
that and it upped it to 100 million. And to Hamas, as he literally said, it doesn't matter. But there are people go like, see, we don't need USAID. It's
Right.
doing that. And they just repeat that thing. I go, what about all the other good stuff? It's $50 million to Hamas for condoms. I'm like,
Right.
I don't know what you're talking about. None of this is all fact. It's not true. So, no, they also inform them and they give them something that's fake, like a lie. We
That's
heard it
right.
about after the 2020 election. Oh my God, so much. But what about this, blah, blah, blah? And they're just repeating it. And then you challenge them on it and they can't answer it. But all right, so refocusing it here. So for me and others in independent media who are trying to cover this in a way that's constructive, that's my goal, to inform
Yep.
people, to build coalitions, to defeat Donald Trump and elect more Democrats.
Yep.
I'm not a journalist. I'm an activist, right? So I that's my agenda. So that's my
Yeah.
agenda. So pick and choose the issues
Yep.
and also personalize it. Like we had someone on yesterday from Social Security Works, John Bauman, who talked about Social Security and they're coming for it. And he went into great detail of what they're doing and how they're going to do it. And people have to be aware. Donald Trump's saying these lies about 20 million people are fraud on Social Security, which is 1/3 of the program almost. It's just the way like the USAID lies. It's to gut the program. So,
Yep. That's right.
but what about
And I would say the
Medicaid
third thing
too?
is
Like,
that then the
what?
third thing is that I think people should be focusing, and to the extent that we are hammering things away, and that this is where then the independent media can help push Democrats to actually take these fights on. I think Democrats should be in swing districts right now that are held by Republicans. And that's why we should be outside children's hospitals and swing districts. We should be outside the polices. Why? Here's why. One, we should be
Mm-hmm.
drawing attention to the fact that there's a sick kid in there with cancer now that is actually going to get the boot because they just lost their funding, right?
Because of
That
Medicaid,
the
because
hunt,
massive cuts
right?
to Medicaid. They
That's
wanted to,
right,
yep.
because of all these and also a lot of the cuts that they've been doing through NIH grants, which
Mm-hmm.
cover a lot of overhead, which actually is staff a lot of times for it's like they're reducing beds. Like there are actually going to be real connections to these places, and then all these districts have other resources that they get. Um, and what it does is does two things. One, you think the Republican's going to show up in his district the first day that the Democrats roll into town and other leaders roll into town to advocate for the children's hospital? No, but it forces a question. Why is this guy from out of town here, but not my elected Republican leader who won by a
Oh,
small
so you mean
majority?
like, so when you mean Democrats go to a swing district and stand outside of a hospital, I think it's a
Yeah,
great visual too. Who should go there? You're talking like big name Democrats, a DNC chair, state, like a candidate, the Democratic chair of the state? Or, I mean, I'd like less like it being a Democratic chair and more of a policymaker, whoever that might be,
yeah,
or a group of policymakers, perhaps like
yeah. Show
all
up.
Democratic leaders from the area who are elected officials, mayor, county
That's
legislators,
right. Bring the
they
people
all go
there.
there. Okay.
Yes, and drag in a couple local Republicans too that may be willing to go and force some pressure. Why? It's not just a stunt. It isn't a stunt. Actually, I think the thing we have to keep reminding everyone, and this ties into the larger impotency question, is that this guy does not have a massive majority. You know,
No.
when Orban took over, he amended the Constitution 6 times in his first year because his majority was so big. You know, this guy's got 4 seats in the House. Four. Like he's got no like senators I know are a little more insulated from pressure, right? So I say focus on the districts because the House members are going to feel it first, and they're it's just not airtight. I'm sorry. And that is where the pressure point is. Like they can threaten them all the primary challenges they want. And I know that that is what's holding a lot of their people in line. But
Right.
the truth is that primary challenges are ultimately about getting votes. And if you can leapfrog the money and the primary challenge by actually building coalition there, those elected Republicans who are in these tight margins, they can only not show up a few times before they start to themselves feel even increased heat. And it does two things. One, three even. One, you may win some of these fights. So good. Let's do some fun.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's winning is contagious. Two, you then look like you're the advocate for them, which is the thing that Trump has benefited from Republicans, that they tend to fight and show up. And I think the third thing is that it forces these Republicans to then start to make their own political calculation, and aligning reflexively with every right-wing vote is probably not going to be in their best interest. And I think either way, it sets us up to win those seats back at scale in 2026. So I think that is part of it. And how it ties into the media piece is that by spotlighting those examples and those communities, like instead of just being these abstract national places, we should be targeting where we're focusing on the storytelling in the places that get hit the most so that those people that are actually the pivot points can feel the pressure. We don't have to move 100
Interesting.
House Republicans. We need to move 5
Right.
that barely
That
won. That's a lot
I,
easier.
it's a great point. I'm talking with Angelo Carusone from Media Matters, and now Trump wants to take the post office, take control of the post office, which we'll see if it happens or not. But getting back to that for a second, the idea of just consolidating more and more power here, and
Yeah.
the guy's going to run the post office. He couldn't run a casino. Like he ran it to the ground. Now he's going to run the post. No one's going to get their mail. And to your point about personal examples, I cannot agree more. Like the cuts for Medicaid that are on paper for Republicans, $800 billion plus dollars. You can go through how seniors who are in Medicare provided facilities or Medicare funded facilities will literally be out in the street or in their families' homes if they don't have the money anymore. And children's health insurance coverage, that kind of and disabled people so much rely on it, and they're coming for the disability community. it's really out of the Nazi playbook. And my friend was on last week who has cerebral palsy, who's a disability activist, who made that very point. Really eye-opening to me that these authoritarians want to get rid of those that they see as weak in society. I'm like, no. And then you see the cut, you're like, yeah, that's right. They're disposable. They don't view them as important. It's really so that kind of
Yeah.
darkness has to be amplified. It's painful
And
to
oh,
hear,
you're
but that's
so
the truth.
right. And I think that's where the media has failed. The last two, on a micro sense, I think the two areas where corporate media has really just dropped the ball in contextualizing and explaining. One is in this DEI discussion, because embedded within DEI is DIA actually, which is accessibility.
Right.
And that is all part of this. It's just like we get focused so much on like the race, the gender aspect of this, and which I understand, but in all of these cuts, to your point, they're targeting the accessibility piece. And that came out a little bit when Trump was talking about the airline, the FAA thing. He was like, oh, and they have disabled people in here. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Calm down, Jesus.
Right.
And then the other thing where I think the media has really, not done a great job hammering this home is that all of these big cuts that everyone says probationary employee, probationary employee, probationary employee, and immediately you think, oh, new, they're brand new. They've been there a year and a half, whatever, less than a year, a few weeks. But actually, probationary employee in this context means not just new hires, but anyone that has been promoted in the last year or two or transferred, which means you're getting rid of a very significant layer of experienced and high performing people as well. Which are the ones most likely to stand up, and also you just have institutional knowledge. So there's a lot of competency being drained out as well, and I do think that the media has failed a lot at providing that context. They just say probationary employee as if somehow everyone should understand the nuances of that, but really we're talking about like experienced talent, and that is lost. But I think the
Yep.
accessibility piece has totally disappeared from the conversation.
It's not talked about at all. So let's take a quick break. We're going to come back and talk about Media Matters' new report that just came out today about Fox News and how many times Trump officials have appeared on it 1 month, and it's jaw dropping. So let's take a break. We'll be right back with more of our friend Angelo Carusone right after this. And welcome back, Dean Obeidallah Show. We're continuing our conversation with Angelo Carusone, president of Media Matters. So Media Matters, you do a lot of studies. You had a new report today talking about how many times Trump officials have appeared on Fox News in the first month of his presidency. So what's the headline that you can share with us, and what's the significance from your point of view as someone who studies the media?
In the first month, Trump officials have been on 124 times, which is a lot.
In 30 days, 124 times, folks.
It's a lot. It's a
Yeah,
lot. It's a real lot. And it shouldn't come as a surprise. The most significant person or the most regular person has been Tom Homan, who's leading the immigration charge, right? And
right.
that's obviously because it's reflective of their priority. And what I think is key about this at a top level is, obviously I run a nonprofit. When you raise money, after you raise money, you tend to go back to the people that gave you money in a year and say, hey, I told you I was going to do this, and it's been a year, and here's the examples of how I did it. Can I get some more money?
Right.
You report back, and it's
Sure.
kind of what they're doing here, right? That if you're a Fox viewer, you got hammered with certain messages and promises and assurances and stories for a very long time, and they need to make good. And they, at minimum, at a narrative level, whether or not it's actually happening is kind of irrelevant. They need to make good to a key part of their audience, because there's a segment of the base that is mad that more mean things are not being done to immigrants, right? And so they need to sort of shore that up first, and to make it seem like the problem is gone. And Tom Homan being on the most 20 times is reflective of that. It is very
Interesting.
clearly, a tie in there. And then the rest of it is like the usual suspects, right? I mean, obviously Trump has been on 5 times, and Doug Burgum and Sean Duffy. None of these things should be terribly surprising. Obviously, Marco Rubio has barely been a presence on there, which should tell you what you need to. And neither has JD Vance, right? He's been on like 3 times, and in these minor appearances, it's not been somebody he's let out there front and center, which should be the opposite, given the fact that his role in other ways has been seemingly diminished. And but no, he's not been a big presence, and that's, I think, because he doesn't want to get the attention. So big picture, that's what I think is significant about it. The other part, though, is like it tells us what we need to know about Fox, is that they've always been sort of an extension of the administration. The
Hmm.
last thing, though, and this is the difference between this time and last time. Last time, there was a feedback loop between Fox and Trump. And so sometimes
Yeah.
Trump would be leading Fox, and sometimes Fox would be leading Trump. That's not the case right now. Fox is an extension and purely a secondary mechanism by which Trump is distributing his messages. And I think that's because a lot in the landscape has changed, right? Between X and Trump having his own platform. Um, and that means that in a weird way, they're just desperate to have that presence. And they don't want to lose their edge to some of these newer figures like a Jack Posobiec or a Charlie Kirk, who's literally on the plane sitting next to, the vice president on some of these rides, or, Benny Johnson, who is at the EPA, there as if he's like one of the team, reporting and talking about these things that they're doing, sort of getting their propaganda out. So that is, I think that from just a qualitative sense, it is an indicator of their changed posture in the landscape. They are no longer central to that feedback loop. They're just basically sloppy seconds right now.
I remember when we talked about the Fox feedback loop on the show. You guys wrote about that. We covered that
Yeah.
on the show. And it's interesting that's changed. They're just integrated now into the system. They are part of the messaging device. And maybe it's because Tucker Carlson's gone, because Tucker was a unique leader. He was moving where MAGA is today, Tucker was years ago, right? Openly white nationalist, get rid of the migrants, they're making America weak, all that kind of stuff. And Tucker was
Yeah.
saying stuff, and it was rattling people. And now it's one and the same. I don't know. And it doesn't even matter what they believe. It doesn't matter what Jesse Waters actually believes or Sean Hannity believes. They're just their platform to let Trump spew his stuff. And I imagine that the Fox News viewers will never see the new approval ratings sliding for Trump, or the consumer sentiment numbers that just came out for University of Michigan today, showing a 10-point drop in the first month of Trump, the lowest in 3 years, and that people are really concerned about consumer prices and that stock market. The one thing is they might see the stock market if they have an IRA or 401k or a stock portfolio, because it's been 2 days in a row, and this is tied to Trump. The uncertainty he's caused with tariffs is
Yeah.
freaking people out on the market. They're finally catching up. Like, this is not good. We can't plan for the future. And that cuts into bottom lines of companies. So that's very interesting.
That's right.
But I want to touch on the AP being banned from the Trump press room and from the Air Force One. And what happens is
Yeah.
AP, the Associated Press, refuses to use Gulf of America instead of Gulf of Mexico. And they put out a reason why. They weren't being partisan. They're going, that's been the name for 400 years. We have international people who read our stuff, and we got to keep it with what people know it as. And Trump's like, well, if you're not going to use the exact language I want, you're banned from having access here directly. Why does it matter? What can you share?
I mean, I think that there's always going to be a tension, right, between the White House and political figures and the press. That's
Mm-hmm.
part of it. You're going to write things they don't like sometimes. The big thing here basically is that AP has a style guide, and I think it's critical because I think sometimes people think, oh, it's just the AP, but actually it says a lot because the AP, we talked about how much local media is hollowed out and everything. What the AP does has profound effect on the media landscape because so much local news is
Hmm.
tied into the AP's coverage, right? They sort of take the wire that the AP provides and either uses it wholesale or does a little bit of extra wraparound on it and then publishes that or uses that for local media reporting, print and TV. So it has a significant multiplier effect in the landscape. So I don't think it's unusual that they'd be so exercised about the AP given the significance. And what's basically going on here is that their style guide just says, because they're an international publication, and the AP style guide is what a lot of publications use. We're not going to call it Gulf of America. We'll call it Gulf of Mexico because it's been historically that for 400 plus years, and all of our guidelines to say that. But we'll also call it Gulf of America. We'll note in a parenthetical or in a
Hmm.
paraphrase that the president has recently designated it Gulf of America, and that's what it is in the United States, right? So there's not like they're pretending that it's not Gulf of America. They're not really choosing a side.
Hmm.
And in a weird way, by the way, this is what everybody else is doing. So, like, when everybody points to Google or Apple and say, oh, Google changed it. Yeah, Google changed it in America. If you go to Canada or Mexico or any other country, it says Gulf of Mexico. So
Oh, interesting.
that
I
is
didn't
what
know that.
their rules are. They didn't bend. What they said is we just do what is in that local country, and that's the end of it. We don't draw a
Oh, yeah, like
record.
the leader of Spain said, we're going to change the name of this thing here. They're not going to go like, we can't do that.
We
That's
just do it.
partisan,
They just
right?
do it.
Oh, that's
They don't
interesting.
have
Yeah.
and then they just segment it to the area that the rule applies to. That whether or not that's a good idea is a separate discussion. But like that's it. So everyone's like, Google changed it. It's like, okay, and Apple uses the actual government services. So they were just waiting till the government geographic services updated their name and then their Apple. Like there's so many dumb reasons why everybody's name changed and had nothing to do with them agreeing with Trump. But this is the AP sticking point. And so they got kicked out of the Oval Office. They said, you're not going to allow to come to these scrums anymore. They got kicked off the plane. They're limiting their overall access. And that's the story, but big picture, you know, in a nutshell. The challenge has been the pushback. Originally, there wasn't a lot of pushback. And now, like, there's a letter, and the White House Correspondents Associations is organized. And this is what I think the real story is. They're organized, they please let them back, right? They're doing
Right.
it quietly. They're pressuring them. And the thing that's significant is that this isn't the first time something like this has happened. In 2009, President Obama, and I think this was the right decision, said, "Hey, Fox News can't join the pool." They weren't kicked off the network. They never had their hard pass removed, their credential. There's this pool reporting, which is like when one reporter from the group gets to go into these private meetings, and then they write a summary that then everybody uses,
Oh yeah,
right?
I wouldn't want Fox to do that either. Right.
Right. It's like no, we literally have a policy that says we can't do live interview like recorded interviews at Fox because they will chop them up and make us look ridiculous. We'll only do live. We cannot trust them to like be the pool reporter. So we will not allow them in the pool. That's our position. But anybody else can join up. Any of the other major places can, but not Fox. Every news outlet said not only did they make a public outcry, but they refused to report. They refused to participate.
Ah.
And the White House backed down immediately and let Fox into the pool. What happened here is different. And what they did is everybody was quiet. Everybody still showed up for their opportunities to sit in the scrum, right? The
Mm-hmm.
APs on the outside, they were there. Um, and they did this quiet letter. And their admission is that they think handling this privately will be better. That if they could just be now, Fox News and Newsmax signed the letter. Good for them. They got two people to sign. But I think the significance is revealing because it shows that they don't feel comfortable doing a public fight. That the retaliation would be too significant, and that's how you know there's a difference here, right? And it's a different in a lot of way. The saying you can't participate in the pool report because you're reporting literally. Remember, let's not forget this is like right after the terrorist fist jab reporting and like
Oh,
Obama
I
birth
remember that.
certificate
Yeah, yeah, I
reporting.
remember
Like
that.
the
Right.
context is Fox ran with birth certificate and terrorist fist jabs for like 6 months. And they're like, you can't join the pool. You guys are crazy. You're like, you'll lie. That's not a ridiculous place to be in, right? But I think that's the real scandal here is that the way the Correspondents Association and the other media dealt with it was not to make a big public outcry and to say we refuse to participate, but was to basically privately ask them. And
I,
that sucks.
it does, and it's a different time where they fear that Donald Trump will really come through, I guess, with getting rid of their access, hurting their careers, not letting them ask questions, whatever it might
Right.
be. And then, and tied into this a little bit, but I want you to tell us if it's as concerning or not. I mean, former longtime CNN Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr is very concerned. At the Pentagon, with under Trump now, they have rotated out, as they called it, a certain media outlets, CNN, NBC News, have to hand over their offices. And who's getting it is Breitbart and Newsmax, but also HuffPost is getting it. And that doesn't get too much coverage, but HuffPost doesn't have the resources and the assets of
Yeah.
CNN or NBC
Yeah.
News. So this is them playing little games, going, okay, we'll throw someone on the left, but they're good. They write nice articles. I read HuffPost almost daily. I get the daily email. But so what is going on? Because she really said this is a significant political pressure, and that she said this is an attack on the free speech and First Amendment, the free press.
I mean, I have a couple of thoughts on this. One, I mean, the HuffPo, obviously, some of the places they threw in there was a troll because they don't even have White House, they don't even have Pentagon correspondents or a team there. They would just put them in
Mm.
there to just tease everybody, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is some of these rotations were actually kind of already happening informally between the networks. Some of these groups were actually giving up their space to other outlets that weren't officially allocated it and to some of these new outlets. That actually was I'm not glossing
Okay.
over it, but I think there's three sort of things. One, some is like it's irrelevant, like HuffPo. The other is like some of these places, like Newsmax was already in an arrangement to sort of get to borrow some space informally from some of these major players, like, because it is a reasonably collegial environment when you sort of get into these small correspondent clusters. Remember,
Right.
you're sitting in these really crappy rooms every day for months and years. You just get to know people, and like most people are pretty okay, even if they're on the right or left. Most people are basically fine,
Right.
and but there is this point where I think a lot of this is performative too. So this is the third piece. It is designed. I don't think it's going to have a huge qualitative effect on the coverage immediately, because the offices, they make things easier in some ways. It gives you a center of gravity. It gives you the ability to have like a dedicated workspace to put things out. But this is not the 1980s anymore, where you had to like run out to the payphone and like call in your story. And it's like you have a phone. And it's like
Right. Right.
you don't. A lot of the benefits of these like physical infrastructure were designed on a type of reporting model where like you were like filing stories, and you needed to have a team available to. It's structurally so different now that as long as you don't lose your hard pass or credential to be in the physical space, then you don't actually, it's not going to have that much of a huge effect. And they're not, as far as I'm aware yet, they're not losing their riser coverage. And that I think is important. So the riser is the space in the briefing room where you get to have a camera and a
Oh,
crew
okay.
that can
I bet.
report on it. And if
Okay.
you lose the riser, then you can't control your own camera, which means you have to then rely on a feed from another network. And that means you lose reporting control. So
Hmm.
I don't want to diminish it, but like, I think the bigger thing here is the conflict. It's like the guy's a Fox News host who comes in is like, everybody that's not Fox, get out. It's like, I mean, that I think is, and I also think he's sending a message that we're going to punish and retaliate for what we perceive as bad coverage. But I really think it was Hegseth doing a lot of trolling. I know it sucks. I don't like it. I'm not trying to like diminish the significance of it. I don't think it's going to have that big of a profound effect on the reporting coverage. It is going to have an effect on those reporters' lives, though. Their lives are going to be harder. Like if you have a desk and a spot, now you're going to have these giant
Sure.
beds. It's a pain. And CNN is a real like these are real news operations with real teams that could benefit from having the ability to communicate and operate. And now they lose that, and that is going to have an effect on the coverage. But the single biggest like stuff that comes out of this, confidential sources, where they're really breaking explosive stories, they were not relying on that desk to build those relationships, to cultivate they were not cultivating secret sources in their CNN newsroom desk in the Pentagon.
Okay. So
So
let's.
I don't want to diminish
Who
it.
knows who
It
Barbara
is a
Starr
big
was?
deal,
Barbara Starr was there forever. They would go to
you
her,
know.
and she'd be seeing that little cubby hole that we saw for decades,
Yeah,
and she was let go a while ago. She left or retired. Last thing I want to touch on is I find it interesting. Trump is getting all the press he wants and more. Like it's nonstop. It's
I
attention,
know.
attention. I just interviewed Chris Hayes last week about his book, The Sirens Call, about the attention industry. But what's interesting is he's getting all the attention he wants. But polls this week, CNN, Gallup, Ipsos, and Quinnipiac, all shows approval ratings dropping. And
Yeah,
one of them, I think it was either Quinnipiac or whatever, his lowest handling on the economy, even compared to his first term now. So
yeah.
something is breaking through, even though the media is
Oh yeah.
all Trump all the time. There's some negative coverage here and there, but all the coverage makes it omnipotent. Like he's everywhere. He's got to be all powerful, but people are seeing through it. And I wonder if it's because of the inflation. And it's like that is the kryptonite here, even though he's getting all this press that he wants. This is beginning to take a drag. It's only a month in. And to remind people, Biden stayed about a 50% approval rating until August of his first year. And that was the Afghanistan withdrawal. And that from then on, he never recovered over that. Trump's already, his
Yeah,
average is at 46, 47 right now. So already
yeah.
have seen a slide. What is your take on what's going on?
I think a couple of things. One, and I think this is a classic issue that always hurts a president, is like when you are seen as spending more time worrying about the rest of the world than your own country, it tends to make people upset. And his whole thing is America first, and yet he spends more time talking about Greenland, Canada, Gaza, Panama Canal, right? I mean, he hasn't let these things go, and and that is for the person that like is not consuming it day to day like a diehard Trump supporter, but the person that voted for him, it's like I voted for him because I thought it was America first, and because he was going to use his magic business skills to make my life better. And then like I randomly caught him talking about building a hotel in Gaza, huh? It's like I don't even know where Gaza is. that's weird. I know it's not in America. And all of a sudden he wants to invade Canada. Like, I don't want to invade Canada. I don't want my kid to go to war. I thought he was a peace candidate. So
Right.
one is he is talking when he does engage, it is a lot about other stuff. The other thing is, and this is a visual thing, but I do think it's significant. Something has changed. And if you look at the way he looks, not
Interesting.
age-wise, look at his suits. They used to be big and loose, and he's just, he's wearing sort of this oversized suit, kind of wrinkly, just a regular fabric. He looks like he came out of Goodfellas now, right? His suits are, I'm not joking. No, no, for real,
I've
for
seen
real.
Goodfellas like 25 times, being half
His suits
Sicilian.
are now, he has them tailored. His suits are all cut and form fitted. He changed the fabrics. They are thicker, heavier, and shinier. They have a sheen to them. They're all different. He's totally changed his look. And that is a big thing. Visually, it's like, is he trying to be something he's not? Right? Why is he not wearing
Oh,
like
interesting.
and it's not that people are judging him for his looks, but then all of a sudden he gets up there and he's saying all this stuff that's not about the things that he had been talking about, egg prices and the economy, and he seems to be delegating all this authority to Doge and Musk. They're kind of sucking up to him, but I thought Trump was the alpha. But it doesn't look like the alpha. I thought he was the big boss, but now he's all dressed up and there's a guy in a t-shirt, like just like ranting next to him, and he's just like quietly listening, and like it's kind of messing with people's impression of the guy. And which is that
That's
I have my hand
interesting.
on the wheel, don't worry. And so from an approval perspective, it's like, no, no, I approve of when you do things that seem crazy and weird because I believe that I believe that you have a Midas touch. Even though everything says you don't, and that actually Midas was a curse, but whatever. It's like, but I believe you, but I don't think that guy has a Midas touch. So I do think that from like just like a straight optics visual perspective and a vibe perspective, maybe his base is loving it, but the types of people that switched, they're upset. And then the last thing is they made a lot of promises to people and they reneged on them right away. There's a whole bunch of people they promised not to deport or mess with that have suddenly got deported or lost their jobs. And and I think that is you a pretty significant breach right away. So I
That's
think those
interesting.
are the three things. And then obviously all the tariff and the economy stuff. It's like, wait, I don't understand. I know he has a plan. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, but I actually really think it's going to make everything worse. So please don't make the economy crash, And I think it's those combination of factors that are affecting it, and that's very much why I am so frustrated. In part, why Democrats haven't been able to consolidate, not a you have to come with us sort of thing, but at least consolidate their perception as a more cohesive opposition, so that they can capitalize on it and help people break away and create the permission structures to say, yeah, just not that guy anymore. He does actually
It's
suck.
it's interesting, and nothing moves people more than when they're personally affected, and they see prices keep going up. They see inflation not getting better. They hear about layoffs because 200,000 people let go is going to have an impact on the unemployment rate. And people get, if you cut all these people from the government, who am I going to call up when I need help for something? Am I not getting my IRS tax refund this year? Am I not going to have someone there for any kind of program, or if a family member is on a program and they're worried about them? There's a lot going on. And he signed all these executive orders on DEI, but only one on inflation, and it was bullshit. It wasn't a real one. But, and so thank you, my friend, for staying on so long. It's MediaMatters.org, right? That's the website.
Yep, that's it.
All right. So check out